Hello and good morning. Welcome to our Mindful Monday session, our first one in December. So this morning I'm going to talk to you about nutrition, sleep and screen time. And I know I've had a few questions in already that I will answer. I've sort of incorporated it and changed and added on to what I was going to talk about to try and answer those questions. Of course, if you have any questions as we go along, there's a comments box here. Or you can comment underneath the video as well, and we'll either be able to get back to you today in this session. Alternatively, afterwards, anyone's always welcome in school to have a chat with us. Okay, so this morning our health, sustenance, and screen time and sleep session today. I have done a session very similar to this in previous Mindful Monday sessions as well in previous years. However, I think at this point, with everything that has happened recently, the screen time in particular is becoming more and more of a forefront in our mind, really, and how we can create those healthy habits with children. So these are some of the questions that have come in. I think 1 to 5 of those 7 are already about the screen time aspect. So I have answered those within, but any more questions in the comments, please come in and I will try and answer them as we go along today. Okay, we're going to start off talking about nutrition. So how does nutrition affect children's physical and their mental development? Nutrition is the process of obtaining the food necessary for health and growth. It does differ based on culture, preference, available resources. I know a lot of people here in Dubai, we've moved from other countries. We're all expats here, a lot of us, and what I eat, I know myself in Dubai, is different to what I eat when I'm back home in the UK. Also based on taste, it's what's available, and also the local culture. That's not to say one is better than the other, and it's just having an understanding of that and understanding what we need. So from the ages of between 5 and 12, children's idea of food begins to solidify in their minds. So it's so important that children are exposed to a huge amount of food groups in this time. I know it can be difficult, particularly with children younger than 5. And it becomes, I think that's when it becomes a real issue, I think more for parents, is that the anxiety of making sure that your children have that huge range of diet, because they'll think, oh, they're never going to start eating fruit or vegetables. And actually, it's after 5 when their taste buds change and develop. So as long as you're offering before the age of 5, it's not as much of an issue. Then between 5 and 12, that we make sure that the children are encouraged to eat a range of food, and then it will give them those good habits for as they grow into adults. So a diet lacking in the basics, especially for developing children, can bring a huge amount of complications later life. So physically, they'll have weakened immune system, skeletal development, etc. Interacting with different children in school, especially a school, with multicultural as ourselves, it exposes children to a whole new variety of food. I actually miss when we had the canteen pre-COVID. I used to love walking around and seeing the vast array and the difference of food that children have from different cultures, and children being able to experience that of each other is huge, and it's really, really, really beneficial. The average daily calorie requirement for a child between 6 and 12 is between 1,400 and 2,200 for boys and 1,400 and 2,000 for girls. So it's not actually that much different from an adult in a lot of ways there. And a lot of that's to do with children's activity during the day. So we're broken down into 2 major food groups. We've got our macronutrients, which is our bigger foods, if you like. So that's your carbohydrates, your proteins, your fats. And then your micronutrients, which is your vitamins and your minerals. So carbohydrates are the main source of energy for your body. And these, again, can differ depending on cultures. And there's not necessarily one better than the other. Of course, a variety is great for the experience of it, as well as what you're getting from that and the nutrients. So this could be bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, chapati, depending on what you have. And it's always better to choose a high fiber source. So going for brown rice or brown bread, whole wheat pasta, that will keep you fuller for longer. But what it means as well is the energy that gets released there gets released really steadily, rather than having this energy and then having that drop off. So 3 to 6 portions a day. So 1 slice of bread, 2 of the small potatoes, or 4 spoons of rice would be a portion. So between 3 and 6 a day is your optimum. Regards for protein, we need that for development of the body, and it's for muscle and tissue repair as well. It's actually a source of calcium in protein as well. So we often think of calcium in milk, cheese, but that also gives us our protein as well, and a good source of vitamin D, which is necessary to absorb that calcium, your iron. So we need 2 to 7 portions a day. So that will be split between your dairy, your meat, your fish, your eggs, your legumes, and your beans, which are all obviously sources of protein. So it's split in between all that, and again, having that variety as well. So your fruits and vegetables is generally where we get most of our vitamins and minerals. They've not got as high a calorie, but again, it's so important. And these help down the breakdown of those carbohydrates, those proteins, and those fats, and help them to absorb that energy. So children and ourselves, obviously, will need those minerals for hormone regulation, cell reproduction. So that's part of your growth. It provides insoluble fiber, which helps regulate the appetite. This can be fresh, it can be canned, it can be dried, it can be frozen. Okay, so if it is a canned fruit, try and get it so it's in water or in its own juice rather than a syrup, because that does put the sugar content up very, very high. We talked a lot about children about eating a rainbow of food. And that's just, again, it's about having that variety. So lots of different colours there of your fruit and your vegetables, as well as all your other nutrients as well, and your macronutrients there. Use this time to open up children's palates. They're exposed to a wide variety of food. The more variety that children are exposed to generally, and the greater the rainbow, then the better diet generally that they are having. So they're getting that huge range, and it also lets them explore. We talk about 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. I know that's something that we're all quite familiar with. I know they've gone up to say 7 in certain things, but with the 5 a day for children, that is optimal. Okay, when we go on to fats and oils, most children receive fat from the other food groups, and it's mostly the protein. It's the cheese, the milk, the meats. But so additional fats and oils, so biscuits, cakes, they tend to have a very high fat content and are mostly empty calories. And by that empty calories, I mean the other food groups are then they're very, very low. It tends to be just fat and sugar mainly, rather than your high vitamins and your high that high content that they will benefit from. So drinks and snacks. Children will often require snacks as an energy requirement as they are increasing through their life cycle. And children do go through peaks and troughs when they're eating as well. So you might find that your children's eating less when their appetite has gone less, and then it will increase again, and that's just part of their growth cycle. It also depends on their activity. So one of the questions actually was about, do children need a different diet if they're doing sport? Well, it's not necessarily about the sports. Yes, they will, but it's also about their activity level. So we have children that are not necessarily doing formal sports, but if they're out running around playing and doing a lot of physical activity and physical play, then yes, their calorie content will need upping. But generally, then you can follow your child's appetite. You don't need to sit and force them to eat more and more. If a child's hungry, generally they will eat. So it's about thinking about from our point of view as their caregivers of what food that we're feeding them, and just making sure that they're offered that variety as well. So when you are selecting snacks, think about those macronutrients. So we're talking here, I've put some pictures up there. There's fruits there, milk, cheese, crackers are great, but whereas the cake, crisps, chips, cookies are not necessary. Now, that's not to say children can never eat that, those sort of treats, but that's just keeping them down to a treat, making sure that children understand and they're offered that huge amount of that variety, and they understand that is a treat. It doesn't mean that they can never ever have it. Okay, portion control. This I think is really interesting, because of course portion differs depending on the size of the person eating it as well. So this is just a rough guide. So cheese, you're looking at a portion of a matchbox. Protein, and fruits and vegetables here, which should make up quite a large part of the children's daily meal. So the protein would be just the size of their hand here. So that's just the palm of their hand, which actually surprises me sometimes, because it can be quite small. Fruit and vegetables, if you cup your hand, so that amount in there. Treats, again, just a tiny, tiny square. And again, it's not saying you don't have any, but it's just about, having that balance. And milk would be a cup. Spreads, so when we're talking about spreads here, we mean butters, peanut butter, jam. That will be a teaspoon on the bread there to make up that portion control. Okay, we've got some ideas here for snack and lunch ideas, because it can be difficult, particularly at the moment when we don't have that canteen there, and how to think of having it's. Well, I know for me as a parent, it's having that variety, because we tend to just fall back to the same thing. So just looking online, there's some great ideas online, and I will put some websites under here about ideas for lunches. But if we look at, so we've got boiled eggs, sliced cheeses, apple, so granola, yogurt, plain yogurt and fruit. It does say low-fat yogurt here, but that is very dependent again, and it doesn't necessarily have to be low fat. It's just about adjusting, thinking about those fat levels as well, and the amount of portion control of the fats that the children are eating each day. Popcorn is actually not unhealthy. I tend to think of popcorn because it's like a movie theater. You think of it, as in your treats, but actually popcorn is a healthy snack there. Cheese slices, deli meat, and then pasta, chicken, and then a side salad with some dressing and fruits. Here we've got an example of food labels. Okay, and it's just about being on the lookout. So a lot of things are labeled as healthy. You might have something that is low sugar, and it will advertise on the front, or low fat, but it tends to compensate in one of the other food groups and might make it unhealthy. A lot of diet foods, for example, that are advertised as low sugar, low salt, tend to be very, very high in sodium, high in that salt. So it's just worth keeping an eye. So if we look at this, you can see anything, and this is all per 100 grams, which is what a lot of food labels are. Anything in fat over 20 grams or saturated fat over 5 grams is very, very high and should be eaten really, really in moderation. Sugar, anything over 15 grams, and salt over 1.5 grams, again, eaten in moderation, and they are very, very high in those contents. And you can see that here. And this, of course, will all be available to you if you want to have a look at it in your own time as well. Okay, so just whiz through nutrition there, because I know we're just doing a 30-minute one. So if you've got any more questions, please feel free to add them in. I will try and get around to them. Nutrition, I wanted to start with because it's the one I think that most of us are more familiar with. So I want to move on to sleep. So how does sleep affect children's physical and mental development? A lot of people have very little understanding of how much bad sleep can impair their ability to function. That is children and adults alike. Some research shows that if children are sleep deprived by just 1 hour each night, it can reduce their cognitive academic performance by up to 2 whole years. So that's just being able to access what's going on for them. So even if they are able to do that work and able to access certain work in school, they just will not be able to reach that and to make any progress with that if they are sleep deprived by only an hour a night. Of course, there are going to be times that this happens. This is the real world. But it's just bearing that in mind and thinking about the implication of that. We also need to recognize that sleep is one of the most powerful performance enhancers known to humankind. If you're serious about academic performance, you should be getting good quality sleep on a regular basis. How much sleep is enough sleep for your child? Now, again, we're looking at a guide here. So we've got, infants we're starting with here. I know it says 10.5 to 18 hours. So that is huge. Okay, so we're looking at 2 months. So we're going to whiz down to that. Once you get up to a year old, after that you're out of the infant stage, it can be up to 14 hours. Children between 1 and 3, so prior to school age, will be 12 to 14 hours. Children between 3 and 5 will be 11 to 13 hours. And it's at this age, really, between 3 and 5, that children will drop the nap. So when I'm looking here at the total sleep time, that will include a nap as well. Children aged 3 to 5 tend to have dropped the nap then. So this will be all at night. And then children aged 5 to 12, again, is 10 to 11 hours. Now, that is an awful lot, particularly when you think how early our children are getting up to come to school here in Dubai. So this is going up to even up to secondary. We should be having, if we're looking at 10 to 11 hours, it drops very, very marginally. When you go all the way up to 18 years, it's still around that 10, 11 hour mark. And again, it's not a one size fits all, but if you think when the children are getting up here at say 6:30, you're not going to get 15, 16-year-olds going to bed at 6:30, to get that 12 hours. So it's really thinking about that implement. And once our children get older than 12 years old, a lot of children tend not to have the same sort of bedtime and the same rules and regulations. It just fits with your family. So it's just really educating children over that about it. So that's why I've stopped this at 12 hours. And it's just really thinking about what time is bedtime, thinking about how early you get up, and also knowing your children. This is a guide. You know yourselves, with you, your friends, your family, I'm sure will are comfortable with different amounts of sleep per night. That's definitely the same with children, but it's just bearing that in mind, and having that consistent bedtime as well is really, really important. So sleep promotes growth. It helps the heart. So experts are still now learning about how much sleep can protect children from vascular damage. It affects weight. It can help prevent illness as well, because it's during sleep that we produce proteins, which the body relies on to fight infection, illness, and stress. So it stops you getting almost run down. So it reduces injury risk when you're tired. It increases attention span. So we've touched on that a little bit as well, thinking about performance in school, ability to access any work that's going on in school. It also says that if children have a lack of sleep, they can almost show the similar symptoms of children with ADHD, which they don't have ADHD. So I'm not saying by any means it would cause it, but it's that sort of impulsivity and that distraction. So it's really, really important. And of course, we've talked again about it boosts learning. So making sure that families get enough sleep is not easy, okay? Especially with parents working longer hours. We've got lots of after school activities, bedrooms full of electronics, and the pressure to pack more and more in each day. So we've done a great job of teaching everyone about why kids need to exercise and eat healthy food. But, and it says here, the simple fact is that children sleep less today than they used to. And until we start to make a real effort to adjust that, then the health of children will suffer, so mentally and physically. So it's really, really important. So it's about having a bedtime routine. So whether that's, we've got here bedtime, brush teeth, go brush, read a book, bedtime, whatever that might be. This will look different for everyone's family, but it's just having that consistency every night. Of course, at the weekends, you might choose to let your children go to bed a little bit later. You may not, but when it is time for bed, it's still having that same routine. So it almost signals to your brain that this is time to go to sleep now, and that will really help children get a good night's sleep and to fall asleep. Okay. Children should have a consistent bedtime ritual by about 3 months old. It shouldn't last more than about half an hour or so. And it's about sticking, it says here, about sticking to usual bedtime sounds, but it's objects, so it could be a particular blanket, pillow, cuddly toy, or anything like that. But it's just all that familiar and setting that stage for sleep. The temperature and light levels in children's room have a huge influence on sleep as well. I know night lights often come in various colours, and the blue light can often interfere with sleep as well and make children wake up that little bit early and not necessarily sleep through the night. Shutting off screens as well. That's the light generated by the screens will disturb sleep and stop children to sleep properly for the full evening. And just 2 hours of screen time right before bed can lower your levels of melatonin, which is the chemical that makes sleep occur, by almost 22%. So huge amount, really. That's just over a fifth. So devices after dinner generally should be ditched there. And that's talking about computers and iPads and those sorts of devices rather than the TV. It's a different sort of light there. It's the same for adults as well. So they say screen time in the evening will stop you having a good sleep. But I know many of us are guilty of sitting in bed, scrolling through your phone, and it's just having that little bit of peace, isn't it, in the evening? So bedtime stories, we know that reading to children helps them learn, but storybooks are a great way for children to start relaxing and going into that sleep, into that deeper sleep, and going there for the evening and really settling down. If you are really struggling as a family as well to get into these routines, run a sleep audit. It sounds very, very official to do as a family, but it really, really does work. It makes sense to periodically measure your child's sleep time. So what time are we going to bed? What time are we getting up? What time do we start the bedtime routine? And just run that for a few days. And it's saying here, a study found that when they encouraged parents to do a sleep study, it found that they underestimated sleep by an average of 109 minutes, which is, that's quite a lot, really. It's almost 2 hours. So it's just about just having that awareness really for ourselves. And you can do it for yourselves. You can make it into, a fun game with your children if it is something that you think is an issue in your home. So I want to move on to screen time now because we don't have all that long left. So how does screen time affect children's physical and mental development? Now, the screen time was what a lot of our questions came on about. So please feel free to ask anything that I haven't answered, and I will go through that as well. So we now have a generation of children that are growing up in a technologically advancing time. There are smartphones, apps. We order everything at the touch of our screens. There's iPads, electronic devices that we have around the home connected to the internet now, video games. They're all incredible learning tools as well and development tools if they're used effectively. Okay, and of course they can be used for entertainment and should be, but it's just about how we limit that and how we can make sure that it's not too much. So how do we know that children have an obsession with screen time? This was, I know a couple of the questions touched upon this. So research has shown that obsession with screen time has become really common amongst children. So if children become angry or sad when screen time is taken away or cut back, you are in danger, I think, of it being an obsession. Now, again, this is using, your parental judgment here. You know that if your child is just wants to do more of it. I know my son, he'll get upset if I take the screen off him, but no more than if I take his roller skates off him or whatever it might be at that time. So it's about using your judgment. But if you do think your child has an obsession with screen time, we've got some ideas here of ways that we can help fix that and help support you with that. So why do we need to unplug? Because all this technology is great and has so many advantages. So why is it an issue? So the effect on sleep that I know I've touched upon previously, screen viewing, specifically on portable devices, has a negative effect on the amount of sleep children of all ages get, but more so on children under the age of 10. It has an effect on activity level. If we're just sitting looking at screens rather than being more physically active, and that will obviously have an effect. It's got effects on cognition. So studies suggest that children who spend more than 2 hours a day looking at a screen get a lower score on thinking and language tests. And that is, when I said looking at a screen there, I mean non-educational. ADHD and anxiety can be increased. It may become difficult for a child to concentrate on one subject or remain calm. And also the danger of lack of offline social skills. If you're doing more independently on a screen rather than socializing, that can prevent healthy development of those social skills as well. So the Cleveland Clinic pediatrician explained that screen time has such a strong effect on children because children need to explore their environments and develop their motor skills. So I know we all say, we should be on our phones less, and as adults we see this all the time, but for children even more so, because they need to develop their motor skills. And they also need to develop their eyesight, and it's all about the physical as well as their mental development as well. It's actually called the nature deficit disorder that they're calling that some children have, who are spending hours and hours and hours a day, young children, on screens rather than actually physically going around to play, developing their fine motor skills, gross motor skills, And like I said, also their eyesight. One of the questions that came through that I'll touch on now was talking about how much screen time is and how long. I will come to that, but the reason, as well as these for screen time with the eyesight, is we say a rule of 20. So every 20 minutes, children need to pull away from the screen and look at something that is 20 feet away. And that is using your eyes to look at far distance things as well. It's young children that have not or have spent too long on iPads and handheld devices tend to have trouble with the long distance vision as well, just because they've been able to exercise that. That's something that's to think about. So what can we do to help? So model good screen habits. So for example, no one in the family has screens at the dinner table. Also play with the children, have alternatives. So board games, limit screen time. So there's a cap on it, and we will touch back on that in a while, because I know people have tried that and said it's quite unsuccessful. Give the children opportunities to socialize and play with their friends, read books together. And you can also, as an option, you could use screen time as a reward. It's important to remember that, yes, research showing that a lot of screen time for entertaining and just occupying time has detrimental effects. But if they're used effectively to enhance learning and development opportunities, it can be a really effective tool as well. So it's about monitoring what the children are doing on the screen as well. So we've got 7 tips on unplugging our children as well. So I will whiz through. I am aware that we are running out of time. So step 1, and this is if you do think there is an issue, have a family meeting and create a plan of action. So you can sit down and say, as a family, we are possibly on our screens too much. We are all going to get involved in this and we're going to fix this. Okay. So talk everyone through the decision with the family, get everyone involved in the discussion and make realistic goals. Some screen time is okay, you know, and I'm talking for entertainment here. Of course, for educational purposes, that's a separate, and we can talk about that. You know, for work purposes, the adults in the house are going to be using it. For educational purposes, the children, and some screen time for entertainment is okay, but it's about talking through these realistic goals. And then how much is too much? So any children under 18 months should have no screen time. Children between 18 months and 2 should be very limited, and they shouldn't be using any screens independently. So it can be used with an adult, and it can be a discussion point. You can look at some apps together. You might want to watch something and talk about what's going on the screen. And that's for children under 2. Children between 2 and 5, screen time should not exceed an hour per day. It needs to involve a parent, so please be involved in what your children are doing on that screen. Monitor those apps. This can be increased slightly at weekends, absolutely. You know, it's not a one size fits all, but it shouldn't exceed double that at a weekend as well. So I would say we're more than 2 hours. And again, here, we're mainly talking about an iPad. Of course, screen time on the TV is another issue there as well. For that one, I would say try and make sure you don't have any background. Don't use TV for background noise. Is a good tip there. So it's about putting that on when there's something particular you want to watch. But looking at the iPad is very different from watching TV, because the TV tends to be the family can discuss what's going on there, because can be more of a group activity. Plus you've got the long distance vision there going on a lot more than on an iPad. So for children aged 6 and older, it's about placing consistent limits. There is, again, no one size fits all. And it's about developing those healthy habits. Look at the type of media that the children are looking at, and it's not taking the place of sleep, it's not taking the place of physical activity and any other behaviours that are essential to health. It says here ages between 10 and 18, it's saying no more than 1 to 2 hours of non-educational screen time a day. So it's all, you know, it's not a million miles off from, you know, young children to 18-year-olds. So it's having those alternatives there and just having those rules in place. For example, having any devices charged outside a bedroom would be a great start. So particularly for the children that are a little bit older, so it's not got that temptation there to go and play on the iPad when it's supposed to be wind down for bed. So step 2, plan for a day to initiate your rehabilitation. So choose a date in advance to start your action plan, and it'll give your children time to prepare and come to terms with this new lifestyle routine that you're going to try out as a family. Step 3, make a list of things to do instead of screen time. So to make the transition easier, create a list of alternative activities, such as sport. You can have outdoor toys and activities, indoor activities, and things that are, there's some ideas here, but of course, again, all children are different, all families are different, so things that you can do, your children can do, and you can do as a family. Step 4, out of sight and out of mind. It is pure torture for children to be told that they can't use their device, but it's left in plain view. If it is accessible, children will want it, and they'll try and use it and grab it. So they're lacking the level of impulse of control needed to walk away from that temptation. So out of sight, there could be somewhere that the devices go when you're not on that device time. And step 5, help your children to play. It may sound a little counterintuitive, but sometimes as parents, it's our job to help teach children how to play. So pull out some toys, sit down with your child and show them how fun it can be to play and use their imagination. Some kids will drive straight into imaginative play, but other children will need that little bit of push and that little bit of guidance. Step 6, model the behaviour. And this is so important. You can't expect children to be all up for this new lifestyle and routine if us as parents are constantly on our phones and devices. So it needs to be something that's agreed as a family. And again, this is answering some of the questions that I had about parents whose children are really, really struggling to unplug. Be mindful of your own phone and technology use. Talk about it as a family and develop an awareness of being present and in the moment with your children. So ask yourself, can it wait until later? And it can't always, but if it can, and you're on your unplugged time, it's great. Step 7, create an alternate route to stay unplugged. So most importantly, create new routines that don't include screen time. So for example, when children come in from school, is that when they automatically grab their device? If that's the case, can you start a new routine to replace this? So is that when you have a snack, or is that when you do homework in that time, or there's a particular game you play or something like that, just to break that routine? This is not about feeling guilty at all. It's just about having that awareness. So these were some of the questions. I actually think we have, I know I've answered them all because I did put that up there at the start, and I did change my slides to incorporate that. If there are any more questions. We've got a question here from Nikita. So it says, which measures are taken at school to avoid longer screen time? Now, obviously in school, the children are using devices. Now, I want to first of all explain how they're used in school, because I know there can be a little bit of confusion surrounding this. So within the school day, the children will use, teachers will use devices to distribute work. So it's almost replacing textbooks, it replaces printouts, all of those things that will be distributed to children. And what it does allow us to do is personalized learning. So they're using it more as a reference, as much and wherever possible. The children are still doing their writing in books. So they're not just staring at a screen and working on a screen, they're using it just as a reference. And it means that teachers are able to send different activities, it might be different scaffold, different support, different stretch challenges to different children in the class really, really easily, meaning that our learning can be more personalised. When it comes to lunch times, there is one day a week that children will be able to, when they're not going out during that will be able to use their devices, and that will be in a structured way, so it will be in an educational game. It's really, really important that we don't have children just playing any games, and that's what they're using at their lunchtime. It is sort of difficult to monitor as the children particularly get into secondary, but for as much as possible, we try and have the children outside and playing, and if they are in class during lunch or anything like that, there tends to be, I know we're doing our Mindful Monday, but we have a Mindful Monday in the classroom for children. We have different things going on each day of the week that the children can be involved in that is away from the screen. Here we got Mike chose an aversion to fruits. He is 5 years old and shows a puking tendency when exposed to fruit. Any advice of what we can do for this? This is really difficult when you're approaching this age, but it is really, really common. So for children, I would just say keep on exposing them to different fruits. If you are really concerned that they are not having all of the vitamins, then a multivitamin will incredibly solve that and just keep offering. Like I said before, between 5 and 12 is when children start to solidify their ideas of food. But you know, if your child is 5-year-old and have an aversion to fruit, it is really common. And as parents, we do tend to really focus on that and tend to get really stressed about that our children are not maybe having the full range of diet. But if you're concerned for the vitamins, a multivitamin, and just keep offering that. Thank you very much, everybody. And any questions, please add to the comment box. Thank you.